right, y'all, come on into my playroom.
We are in for a treat today. I am here with the #1 occupational therapist in Georgia, but even more importantly than that, she's one of my kids' grandmas. How long have you been an occupational therapist?
Been an occupational therapist for over 40 years.
So tell me how you think food and nutrition impacts sensory processing disorder in children.
So a sensory processing disorder involves neurological processing of information to determine what we need to pay attention to that's relevant to the task at hand, or what we need to ignore. So right now, I'm not paying attention to the leaves that are floating around outside the window, the sound of the furnace in the background, the feel of the cushion underneath me. I'm blocking that out because, so it's not relevant to my thoughts that I'm trying to come up with in this process. So I'm blocking that out, and I'm trying to pay attention to the things like what do I want to share with you, and how do I make this relevant to your situation. So in order to do that, I'm processing sensory information at lightning speeds for over 400 billion pieces of sensory information a second, 90% of that which is irrelevant. So in order to do that, my brain has to be really focused and in a good neurological place in order to be efficient and effective. When I eat foods that interfere with maybe my digestion, maybe they excite my nervous system and give me more energy than I know what to do with, or maybe it's not energy that's relevant to sitting here and talking, but instead I could go out on a soccer field and do great with that energy. But when I eat foods that are not in sync with my body's needs, then it can have a negative effect both on my growth and development, but also my energy and my ability to perform things in that moment.
So when you propose these ideas of nutrition to parents, how is it received by the parents? What are the challenges you've faced?
That's changed over the years. I think our diet has also changed over the years. When I first started over 40 years ago, we did not have the same challenges that children are faced with today, whether it's anxiety, depression, social challenges, sleep challenges, gut challenges, or bathroom, elimination, bowel movements, and in particular, attention problems. So that has exponentially gotten more difficult for them, more prevalent in our population. We didn't have children with asthma. We didn't have children with pre-diabetes or weight challenges, that kind of stuff, nearly to the extent that we have now. So the things that I might ask a parent 40 years ago were more sort of common sense of they need to eat less sugar, they need to have a more balanced diet with vegetables and fruit and meats and carbohydrates, but over the time those parameters have even changed, where we're putting more emphasis on fast foods, we're putting more emphasis on sugary treats, and so I think it's harder for families who are trying to eat healthy and well to get away from everyday routine celebrations that may happen at school or may happen around holidays. So I think it's getting harder and harder, and I think families are perhaps having a lifestyle of their own that's making it harder for them to stop and do more home-cooked meals and less processed foods. And so when I'm asking them to try and quote-unquote clean up their child's diet, then they're also thinking about their own ability to carry through and do that. It's not a lack of a want. It's a lack of just availability to do it. And I think there's also a lot more challenges with reading the labels themselves. You might see something that says includes natural flavorings and not realize that there's all those natural flavorings that are not healthy for us, and there may be some chemicals that are added to that to enhance the food so that we want it more. There may be added sugar, there may be added just additives that excite the nervous system on a neurological level, but then want us to crave and for the children to be more persistent in asking for those snacks and those energy bars and those fruit juices. And so it's hard for a family to adapt when the children are exposed not only to those products at home, but they also see them at school. They also see their peers with them. And so when the families are trying to get cleaner, then they're up against what the child is going to be faced with when they're outside of the home and having to rely on the child, to put their own ability to measure what they should and shouldn't eat, which is often very difficult and developmentally a lot of times just not capable for them to be able to do that.
I'd love to hear a success story. I know you have 1,000 of them, but just like a really great example of you've proposed this idea to a family and they actually take it and run with it. Why did the child come in to see you? And then how did it improve that child's quality of life, the parent's quality of life?
So one child's journey particularly stands out. I started seeing her around 3 years old, and I saw her because her meltdowns and her behaviors were becoming very difficult for the family to manage when they might maybe transition out of the home to go somewhere, or winding down to go to sleep, or even in the morning waking up and being full of energy and running around. And it was very difficult for the child to do the things that they needed to do, and for the family to be able to have a life that wasn't constantly trying to manage this child. And so we along many of the questions that I asked is about nutrition. And so what I learned was that the child had actually had a lot of GI problems from probably since birth, and had gone to several GI physicians to get a better understanding. And they didn't have a real strong answer. They didn't have any real clear guidance for what to try to help the child with, other than some over-the-counter sort of basic stuff. And so I suggested the idea of doing an elimination diet, of getting off of wheat and dairy and all additives and color, food, dyes, enhancers and additives inside. And there was a concept that we followed many years ago called the Feingold diet, which actually looked at taking out additives and food colorants and all that kind of stuff. And at the time, back then, it really wasn't as many additives and food colorants as we have now. So it was easier, I think, to find that, to figure out what that, where they were in the ingredients list. But that concept has kind of gone by the wayside, and I don't really know why. But anyway, so this family had tried to get their child and taken them off of wheat for a period of time and taken them off of dairy for a period of time, but they had not done it simultaneously. And the idea with an elimination diet is that you move away, you stop taking a food, for example, and for maybe 4-6 weeks, some people can experience a response even sooner. But you get them off of that, give their body a rest from that, and then you add it back in heavily, one at a time, depending on how many things you've gotten yourself off of, heavily back in one at a time, and see if there's a reaction. And so this family had not done wheat and dairy simultaneously, and she was reluctant to really do it, but she was also at wit's end. She didn't have any other ideas to follow and wasn't getting any different advice, and so she tried it. And I don't remember now the period of time, but it was in a relatively short time, certainly within within a month, I would say, after she's tried it, that she emailed me this long sort of testimonial comment, and she said, I have a new child. My child their temper tantrums are still there, but they're not nearly as intense and extreme, and they're not nearly as often. And so she had gone that extra mile. She had done her due diligence to make sure that she didn't get the wheat or the dairy or the gluten or the casein, as we often refer to, whether it was at home or at school or at a friend's home or that kind of stuff, which can be really hard, particularly if your child's a little bit older and they're not always with you. And so, but one of the things that stood out the most was that this child that was now 4 years old would go to friends' parties, go to other homes where she had the opportunity to eat, whether it was pizza or desserts or whatever. And she would ask the adults, does it have wheat or dairy in it? And if they said, yes, it does, and she said, well, I'm not going to eat it because it makes my tummy hurt and my engine red.
What does the engine red mean?
Engine red is when our arousal system or our energy level, if you will, gets really high and excitable. And so it can be super silly, silly, crazy, or it can be irritated or cranky or just frustrated. So it's a higher arousal state of the nervous system that interferes with our being able to function smoothly with daily life events.
So she was 4 years old saying, it makes my engine red.
Yeah, pretty amazing.
Yeah, pretty
and
amazing.
Stuck to it. And she would sit there and watch her brother, who was a little bit older, eat cookies and cake and stuff that she couldn't eat, and she was not pitching a fit. So in addition to being her own self-advocate, she also, her behaviors were so much more tamer. The challenges that they had at home weren't nearly as frequent and as extreme as I mentioned before. And her mother commented that she felt like she had a new child. Certainly there were some rough times and that they still had with any normal child you would have. But in terms of therapy, she didn't need it.
It almost sounds, I was just thinking this, sounds like you work your way out of a job.
Yeah, I would love to. I would so love to. And I have had children on the spectrum to actually lose their diagnoses from severe to going into to middle school, elementary, a little bit later in elementary and middle school and high school with no one having a clue. People that were versed in the diagnoses to even know that they were on the spectrum. So that's what can be possible when the neurological system is negatively impacted by the foods that we eat, whether it has the artificial colors and the additives, as well as, the wheat has the challenge of being sprayed with glyphosate or Roundup so that gets into the system, and that actually interferes with the gut biome and kills the good bacteria in our gut. And so there's just so many different levels and complexity of food especially in the American diet. And the more we are able to recognize its impact on how we function and how we develop and how we get along with each other, I think the healthier of a society we're going to be, because we're going to start standing up for ourselves more and more and advocating to get these additives and colors out of our diet and just eat a healthier lifestyle.
So what resources have you historically used to point families in the direction of learning more about nutrition and how to improve that area of their life?
I'd have to say Kelly Dorfman, who is a nutritionist out of the Maryland, D.C. area, was my most influential clinician that helped me to understand the connection with nutrition and behavior and neurology and development. And she has written a book called Cure Your Child with Food, and she's written for the Huffington Post, and she's available for consultations. She has just an amazing background of being able to connect the nutritional piece with the development, the neurological piece. And so I highly recommend her book, as well as consulting with her directly. There's another book in terms of looking at cultural differences. I think we've gone from, clean your plate and you can't leave the table until you do so, to, oh, you don't want that, well, let me fix you another dish, or let me fix you 2 or 3 dishes. And that's sending the wrong message, as was the first way. And so we need to have that middle ground where we offer a child a food and ideally have that be the food, and just encourage them, be able to support them in an emotional way, to not make it punitive and not make it make them feel bad. It's just help them to realize that this is their choice, and that it has to be done very carefully and with some guidance, I feel, because you don't want to create eating challenges that are bigger than what you can handle. But setting the expectation to be more realistic and more practical, I think, is important. There's a book called French Kids Eat Everything. And so it's looking at that cultural differences with how what we do differently perhaps than what they're doing.
And I've kind of talked about on a previous video before, children in India eat Indian food, their cultural food. Children in Japan eat their cultural food. They're not eating fast food or whatever. And then here we have parents saying, well, oh, my kid won't eat this or won't eat that. Well, is it that they won't, or that's just what you're presenting to them? That's a challenge.
It is hard. It's hard, especially when you get that nervous system that's speaking up for itself and saying, demanding, I want this, and just can't let go of it. So it's hard. It's really hard. But when you do make the effort, when you make those changes, it can make a world of difference. And when you have the child making that connection themselves and being their own self-advocate, that's priceless.
Well, this has been such a treat to be with the #1 occupational therapist and grandmother in Georgia, talking about nutrition and how it affects the health and lives of our children and the families that we're working with. If you could give just a word of encouragement to our families, to just give them that oomph to make that change, what would you say?
First and foremost, it's worth it. If you do this for your family, if you can put the effort in, put in a little extra time to plan the meals and plan those snacks and involve your children into making playful and fun snacks that they feel more motivated to eat, it will not only change their lives, but it'll change the whole family's lives, because it is a family approach that you want to look at, and you'll feel better about what you're feeding them. You'll feel better because you're eating what you're feeding them as well, and they will feel better, certainly. So know that it's worth it, and know that a movement has started. We're becoming more aware, and we're talking more about these concerns, and some of the food industries are even talking about cleaning up taking away the red food number 3, I think, is already taken out for the FDA. All right. And beef tallows being added to the fast food restaurant menus. And although we don't want that necessarily to be the safeguard to say, oh yeah, we can eat it fast food now, but we're talking about it. And I think it's hopefully going to become easier and easier. Thankfully, some of the ingredients list are spelling things out more clearly, and the general rule of thumb is if you can't pronounce it, try to avoid it. But get your children involved. It's really well worth it. You will potentially see changes within even a week or 2, and certainly it'll change your child's health and well-being for their lifetime. And if the family's doing it, there's yours as well. So, thanks for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
That was fun. See y'all later.